Funding for Decibel is provided by Texas Mutual Insurance.
How are we going to lead with courage, tenacity, and purpose to address the ongoing racial issues that we have in our community?
It's a tale of two cities, right here in the east side of Austin.
Good evening, I'm Judy Maggio. Welcome to Houston-Tillotson University, our backdrop for tonight's Decibel on Austin's racial divide. This historically black university is perched on a hill in the heart of East Austin. It was founded in the late 19th century and has deep roots in this rapidly changing part of town. And like so many longtime neighbors here, HTU remains firmly planted in the community despite gentrification. Austin's famous for its progressive policies and attitudes, but it's the only major metropolitan city in the entire country with a dwindling African-American population. Our city is segregated in many different ways. For the next half hour, we'll take a look back at how we got here, the current challenges, and possible solutions. Austin's African-American and Latino families made their homes east of I-35 by force. City leaders created a 1928 master plan requiring them to live there.
In the late 1920s, early 1930s, I understand that if blacks tried to buy a house, or like a lot of them worked for whites who, when they died, left the house to them, the city of Austin would not turn on the utilities. So that meant that the only place we could live was on this side of I-35.
Fast forward 90 years and you'll see gentrification is now alive and well. The popularity of East Austin's real estate close to downtown is pushing property values up and longtime homeowners out.
Where do these people go in a fixed income? I mean, their roots are here.
In 2017, a citywide task force on institutional racism came up with hundreds of recommendations in key areas, from education to criminal justice to housing. HTU President Colette Pierce Burnett co-chaired it. While she sees positive progress on key priorities, she says the hardest part is still ahead.
Racial divides continue to live as long as people don't confront them. And that confronting has to be fearless. It's hard work. And when people get uncomfortable, they tend to shy back and don't want to do the hard work anymore. So that's where the history will continue to be present.
Real estate is often the most glaring way we see Austin's racial divide. We met a local veteran having trouble holding on to his family home because of the harsh realities of gentrification.
Where do these people go in a fixed income? I mean, their roots are here.
A glimpse into East Austin's not-so-distant past. Close-knit communities of color, first forced to live here by segregation, several generations later, staying by choice. But now, many minority families have no choice but to leave their longtime homes. Rapidly rising property taxes are pushing them out.
They get behind on their taxes, and that's when, boom, people just like, all right, this guy, he's getting behind on his taxes. Let's go get that house, and they get it cheap, and they turn around and they flip it, And
Andrew Rambo Ramirez is a disabled Army veteran. His family home has stood on a corner lot in East Austin since 1902. Other than his stint in the Army, he's never lived anywhere else.
I don't want to leave my home. My roots are here, and I don't want to go in a state of shock. But come on in, guys, all right.
So I know you must have some family photos if you've been around here this long.
Yes, of course.
Rambo's favorite family
like
photos line the walls of his living room. People he loved, long gone. This home is his legacy.
Yeah, this is my dad, this is Mr. Frank Ramirez.
A place Rambo's father told him to keep as long as he paid the property taxes. But that was before East Austin was gentrified, before a fancy bistro replaced the old laundromat, and humble homes bulldozed. to make way for high-end designer digs.
Back then, I was like paying, $500 on taxes, from $500 to $8,000. Yep.
In just a matter of how many years?
Man, just within 10 years,
Rambo is now worried the same hefty tax bills chasing off his neighbors will someday send him packing, too.
Man, why run all these poor people out of here, I mean, I know that they're not rich, but their roots are here, and where they go, I have no idea. But it's happening. They're leaving.
Rambo's plight is nothing new. Austin often tops the list as the most economically segregated city in the country. As throngs of newcomers move in, minorities move out. What does this street mean to you?
Oh,
What does the corner of Haskell and Robert Martinez mean to you?
This is my life right here, It's right here, corner lot, Rambo corner.
It's clear Rambo isn't ready to pull up roots. He's motivated by new home renovations and repairs, courtesy of Meals on Wheels Central Texas and other local nonprofits. He's decided to dig in his heels. After all, his Army training taught him to stand his ground.
Yes, ma'am, I'm not giving up. I'm hanging in there. I'm giving all my disability check, just to pay the taxes. And I may not have no new furniture, but, in the military, we just improvise.
As Austin's economy thrives, the racial wealth gap is growing wider. Decibel's Joe Rocha researched the racial wealth divide and discovered it's a direct result of systemic racism.
In the wake of the Great Depression, there were a lot of federal programs to subsidize and enable families to purchase homes. But as part of the access to that program, certain neighborhoods literally had red lines drawn around those, and those tended to be predominantly African American and Latino neighborhoods. We all know about the East-West divide in Austin. That's a long-standing part of our history and has played into a lot of the racial economic dynamics that we see. And so what you found is that those families didn't have access to the kinds of resources that would enable them to access affordable home mortgages and buy homes and build assets. And so we see that pervasive system building up to the system that we have today, where we see tremendous wealth gaps. What we find is that we really have a bifurcated or divided financial service system. You have the mainstream banks and the credit unions, and then you have the finance companies, the payday lenders, the buy here, pay here auto dealers. And once a family gets trapped into that alternative financial sector, it's very difficult to move into the prime or the mainstream financial system. If you want to buy a car, you have to pay 20% interest, not 1.5% interest. If you need access to emergency money, it's at 500% interest for a payday loan. If you want to buy a house, people end up in these very creative owner-financed or other kinds of loans that in some circumstances can be helpful, but in too many circumstances end up having abusive components, and people end up losing a lot of the equity that they invested in those resources. And so they're trapped in a system that almost keeps our poor families and struggling families poor.
52% of Austinites do not have at least $2,000 worth of savings to sustain them for 3 months at the poverty level.
Yvette Ruiz is with J.P. Morgan Chase, who funded a study on the racial wealth divide in Austin. It was conducted by the nonprofit out of Washington, D.C., Prosperity Now, and Austin Community Foundation.
In terms of how we're doing with the racial wealth divide in comparison to other cities, I would say we're definitely in the top percentage of highly unequal cities. We're not talking about wealthy, we're talking about wealth. We're talking about access to capital to help families be comfortable so that when their child gets sick or if they get sick, they don't go bankrupt. Vulnerable communities, vulnerable families don't go to predatory lenders because they want to buy a flat screen TV. They go because there's a gap in their finances.
If you look at where finance companies and payday lenders are located as compared to banks and credit unions, there are pretty clear patterns of where those businesses are located, and they tend to be highly correlated to the high concentrations of Latino and African American families and lower income families.
We have a really wonderful partnership with a collaborative of organizations. One of them is based here in Austin, BCL of Texas. BCL stands for Business Community Lending of Texas. And they have identified a small dollar loan alternative.
So the Community Loan Center is an employee-based loan program. It's where we offer a small dollar loan amount of $1,000 and we provide a lower interest rate. Our renewal period is a 12-month period, and it's going through payroll deductions or electronic bank transfers from their bank account where they're able to pay it back regularly and pay it back over the course of 12 months versus having to come up with $1,000 in 2 weeks. We know that the consumer loan program that we offer would be a great component to really help combat the predatory lending that's going on right now in Austin.
But Austin was the second city in Texas to adopt the Unified Payday and Auto Title Lending Ordinance. They put some basic framework of protection into place. And what we've seen is it's been pretty meaningful. From the peak of fees charged in Austin, families have saved more than $20 million.
This report kind of paints a very clear picture of a lived experience. Austin is doing great from an economic development perspective, but this report also shows that a rising tide does not raise all boats. This prosperity that we have come into is not equal, and that is a new story that's unique to the country because not everyone is seeing this prosperity the way Austin is seeing it.
Wilhelmina Delco is just a few months shy of her 90th birthday, and she is still going strong. We sat down with Austin's first African-American public office holder to get her perspective on our city's racial divide.
Hey, listen.
But you got all these great-grandbabies.
I was telling the Democratic Party that they always have all of these.
So which other awards? What do you think about Austin being the only major city in the country losing its African-American population?
It's easy to understand because what is happening now is that whites have discovered East Austin and they're offering outrageous prices for our homes because they've discovered they're well built, they're in nice, quiet neighborhoods. And what is happening is that the amount of taxes you pay depend upon the value of the last piece of property sold, which means that they're driving young blacks out. My daughters, none of them live in East Austin because they cannot afford the taxes.
Talk about your experience in political office because you were the first African-American public office holder.
Actually, when I ran for the school board, I wasn't thinking of it as a political position. I was thinking that over here in East Austin, we had issues that apparently the other members of the board weren't aware of or comfortable dealing with. So we needed somebody on the board, and I decided to run.
What do you think about Austin's future? What would you predict about our future as a community when it comes to racial equality?
I don't think we're ever going to be exactly equal in each other's sights because I think that you grow up with stereotypical images that you have of people, and if you find somebody that you like in that group, you make them an exception. You don't make them an example of what the whole group is like. But I think the intermingling, the sharing of resources, the sharing of facilities, the benefits of having our kids in school together is going to make a difference in the political figure. It softens the structure of segregation, particularly now since whites have no doubt about moving over here. There was a time you couldn't get them to cross the street, and now very comfortable in living over here. And I think that's a good thing for Austin.
This year's South by Southwest featured a host of panels on diversity in the tech industry, or the lack thereof. Locals say it's reflective of a larger conversation about just who's building the technology of tomorrow and who's being left out. Decibel's Blair Waltman-Alexan has the story.
As tech becomes more powerful, there are growing questions now about who's building the tech, how are they building the tech, what are they building the tech for, and who does the technology serve?
And so we have to find a way to create a safer space in order for people to share.
I feel like there's a lot of talk going on right now about how to solve diversity, not only in South by, just in the industry as well.
But I think South by is just a reflection of a growing concern about the tech industry.
This isn't a new phenomenon. I think since the 80s, when the women in computer science majors kind of dipped, this has been something that people have known is going on. I think the conversation is great, but nobody wants to throw down real cash and real consequences into making that happen.
This all really started back in 2014 when Google was the first company to release its workforce statistics. And the tech companies up until then had resisted doing that. And what it showed back in 2014, overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly male. I think blacks and Latinos maybe represented 2 or 3% of the workforce in Google. And the data still suggests the disproportionate number of whites versus Latino and African Americans working in the industry. What it leads to is a number of problems.
I don't remember which company it was, but somebody put out a motion detector camera that couldn't detect people with dark skin. I think Apple's unlock your face technology in China was confusing people.
You have some judges around the country who are using artificial intelligence-based systems in order to make sentencing decisions about how long someone might spend in prison.
And Google Photos was tagging black people as gorillas. So those are all really, I think, good examples of like, what are you doing?
You're not actually looking initially to find out what is in that data. When we're talking about technology to finding the right, restaurant locally, that's one thing, versus healthcare, that may be somebody's life or death. Having that diverse team will help call out the questions that are necessary to figure out which one of those pieces is the most flawed right now. Because if we just have people who think the same, look the same, it's hard to see those extra pieces that can actually be very damaging to the population.
You having a good South by? A lot of the tech companies have recognized that where they recruit is a problem as well.
So when organizations are talking about pipeline issues, obviously that's a real thing, but I don't think that that is the most critical part of the equation. Because what we're saying is that there are no people of color, women, LGBTQ that we can find. I have a hard time believing that the people aren't out there.
So they're usually going to campuses like Stanford, MIT, and these tend to be campuses where there aren't many African American and Latinos, or there aren't many women in the kinds of programs that these companies have oftentimes sought out, engineering, computer science, for example. If you expand where you look for talent, you have a much better chance of creating a much more diverse workforce.
Try to recruit people from St. Edward's University, try to recruit people from Houston-Tillotson University, because they're right there. It's not going to cost you a lot of money, but it will give you different results.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Sarah.
Women Who Code is a nonprofit, and so the aim is just to, help women pursue careers in technology. I had a rather unscrupulous recruiter reach out to me recently. He wanted me to use my Women Who Code contacts to find him a candidate with 5+ years of experience. And I'm thinking to myself, everybody wants that woman, dude, And that's the problem, is everybody's looking for, can I just sit here and have the perfect candidate walk into my office and apply to my job, right? And that's the thing, is the women that have already had experience, that are already in this industry, they don't want to go work at your company that doesn't care about diversity and inclusion, because they don't need to go through that anymore.
Just because we can recruit a bunch of people, that doesn't lead to the solution. It's about recruiting the people, retaining the people, and making sure that everybody understands the value of all the people there, right? That's the inclusion piece. I am optimistic for the future. The question for me is, what will be the consequences and the damage that we have to absorb in order for them to get there?
Now there are enough people in the field who either have enough experience or clout to build their own organizations or start their own companies. And so I think that that's really kind of where the change is going to happen.
I don't believe the tech companies left to their own devices will solve those problems, but I do believe if the public continues to apply pressure, that they will continue to make strides in efforts to try and do better.
Well, you don't need technology to enjoy Sam's Barbecue. He says you don't even need teeth. The restaurant's been a fixture on East 12th Street for more than 6 decades, and despite offers of millions of dollars, owner Brian Mays says he's staying put.
Everything will change. Everything will change. Now we don't have no black pharmacy no more. We ain't got no black store no more. Now all that's gone. All the black clubs gone. But I ain't going away.
So tell me about the mural.
There you go. See, this mirror here mean a whole lot to me right here. Because Martin Luther King, I didn't understand what it mean. We all came on different ships, but now we're in the same boat. See, now I understand what this mirror mean to me, and I put that mirror on my wall for that. So when you come to Austin, we all got to come together. We all come on different ships, but now we're in the same boat. We bought the business when my daddy won this in a gambling game.
In a gambling game?
Right, Sam's.
This business was won in a gambling game.
Right, Sam Barbecue.
And then you bought the land.
Right,
afterwards.
76 afterward.
It was what did you pay for it?
We paid about $60,000.
For this whole plot of land.
This is
So
lot
it's
right
2
here.
lots.
It was old. It wasn't nothing like this. It wasn't nothing but a wall right here.
Okay.
It was just.
Oh, so it ended here.
It ended right here, just right here, and right there, that's it.
Okay, I see. So is back here where the magic happens? Is this where the food is?
And so you grew up around here.
Right here, right.
Where did you grow up?
In the projects, and then out there on Springdale. We moved up in Springdale. It was a dead end of Austin. That was the city limit sign right there. Now the city limit go way back there now. But they move everything.
Okay, so what's under here?
Chicken rib, brisket, chicken, mutton, everything right now.
So I understand that you've had offers to buy this land. So this is a couple of lots, right? This where this is and next door, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what have been the offers? Would you consider an offer for this property in this place?
Well, I said 10 million once before. We can start at 10 million and go down, but it's gonna be hard to take me all the way down. I don't have to sell. I know they're gonna build up around me. I know they already built up around me. But once they give me 10 million, they do what they want to do. I done sold out. I done do what everybody else did, sold out. Everybody know we sold out a long time ago. But I'm still hanging in here. I'm hanging. They gonna get me because they want this property. If they want this property, they gonna buy it. But I'm not gonna give it away.
Anything else you want to share about Sam's Barbecue?
Well, we love everybody. You don't need no teeth when you come here. If you got dinner, take them out and come on down.
You don't need any teeth?
To eat my beef at Sam's Barbecue.
You don't need teeth?
You don't need none. I ain't got none. Where the camera? Yeah, it's all that.
Dismantling racism is hard work. Austin appears to be in it for the long haul, but it will take a community-wide effort on the part of people from all walks of life. We leave you tonight with a message from the president here at HTU, Dr. Colette Pierce Burnett.
So I encourage everyday citizens to either get engaged in this work or to do some self-reflection on how you in your own life are working towards either being a part of continuing a racist system, or a part of continuing something that is not inclusive, or being a part of, even if it's laughing at a joke that's not appropriate, all the way to how you operate in your own workspace. Austin's racial divide is ongoing unless we start doing something about it intentionally, and not just talk, but action.
Thanks so much for spending part of your evening with us. If you enjoyed tonight's Decibel, be sure to like our Facebook page or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our mission at Decibel is to amplify issues that matter.
Funding for Decibel is provided by Texas Mutual Insurance.